Here's the reality. One of the reasons why teens today are struggling so much throughout the dating years is because as parents, we haven't given them the guidance that they need through a healthy, successful game plan so that they can succeed in dating. And today the stakes are so high because teens can make some serious mistakes that really can have a negative impact on their lives and follow them throughout their adult life or into marriage even. And they desperately need our guidance in this area. I want to give you 3 ways that you can help your teens with this starting today. Honestly, we could talk about this for a long time. I'm real passionate about this. But the thing about our kids today is that there's an overwhelming amount of confusing messages coming from Hollywood culture, through social media, combined with the fact that our kids' brains, our teenagers' brains are still like only halfway through development when it comes to long-range decision making and really being able to understand consequences in their lives. This is the reason why they need us so badly. They need our guidance in their lives. I've mentioned this before, but there's a study that's really powerful, and it shows that when high schoolers and college-age students were asked who influences you the most when it comes to sex and relationships, their answer overwhelmingly wasn't Hollywood culture, their friends, the music they listened to, but it was you and I, their parents. But the question is, how can we, who probably weren't given a lot of guidance, we probably just stumbled our way through dating ourselves, how can we better do this for our kids, especially with culture being the way that it is and it's changing so quickly? A lot of ways we can't relate to it. So what can we do? All right, so I want to jump into this and share some thoughts that I have with you, really to challenge you. This is going to be very challenging for you, okay? This is gonna be a little gnarly, so you might need to watch this later with a friend or talk about it with your spouse. But the first thing that I want to talk about when it comes to what age should you start dating as a teenager? I get this question when I speak to young people and I ask them, hey, write down like 3, 4, 5 questions that you have about sex, dating, relationships. And honestly, by far, the biggest question that I get is, when should I start dating? At what age, okay? So I'm not going to give you something like, I'm not going to be, dogmatic about it, but I just want to let you know like something that I think and how I'm raising my kids, right? Because this is where the rubber hits the road. Like, it's happening in my life, so what are you going to do about it? For me, we have this phrase in our family. It's start at 16, right? It's like a hashtag for us. Start at 16, and what that means is it's a conversation starter at 16 for 3 things. Okay, so for data phones that have a lot of components on it and whatnot, data phones, social media, and dating. Okay, so basically you can't even start that conversation until you're 16 when it comes to those 3 areas. Now that might be a little crazy for you, might sound a little gnarly, but the reason why we do this is because, as I mentioned, the brain development of young people, really with the prefrontal cortex, because brains develop from the back to the front, right? The final part is really in their mid-20s by the time they get to a place where they can really begin to see the fullness of the consequences of their decision making, etc. So that's why, parents or laws or other leaders, teachers, and coaches and mentors exist and should exist in young people's lives to help them make these really important decisions as they grow. So to wait until about 16 or so, now they're still in the midst of a lot of changes and stuff, but they've gotten over the major hump of their transition into young adulthood, and yet there's still a long way to go. So it's kind of tricky because in one sense you could say, well, you're just not going to date till you're 19 or 20 or whatever, because the stakes are high. However, there's something in me also that says, you know what, shucks, if you want to do that, you don't have to date, but if you're going to, to have a year or 2 of that experience happen while you're still at home, let's say some of our kids are going to leave at 18 or 19 or whatever, go to college or something, that at least to have some of that experience under our guidance and with our help is really, really powerful. So anyway, I'm not saying you have to do that, but just something for you to think about. Number 2, there's something that I call a responsibility checklist. And again, I'm working on some of these things, like courses and things that I want to be able to get to you in the future, but I just want to talk to you about these ideas right now. A responsibility checklist is really, let's say, 10 items. And let's say you did this today. Just sit down and write down 10 items that you think show in a very practical and clear way for your teenager what maturity, self-discipline, responsibility, what do those things look like in your child's life? before they can start dating. And what I'm talking about is consistency in some areas, right? Doesn't mean that they're going to be perfect, just like you and I aren't going to be perfect as parents. However, if they can't make their bed every day, then they shouldn't be dating. You know what I'm saying? If they can't do their chores, what about their attitude, the way that they speak to you, how obedient they are? Are they transparent? How are they dealing with if they have phones or whatever? Like there should be their chores, right? There's grades. There are some things because, and this is what you really need to share with your teenager is, hey, this is a humongous step in young adulthood and towards maturity, and you're dealing with someone else's life, you're dealing with another person, another family, and so to take, you're just trying to figure out yourself. What kind of mastery do you have even over your own life? Here's what I think you should be showing on a consistent basis before we have a discussion about if you're ready to date, right? So that might be totally new and foreign as an idea for you, because a lot of us are just like, well, you like this girl or like this guy or whatever. It's just like, it just kind of happens and your friends are doing it, everybody's doing it. Listen, that's the culture that your kid is growing up in. We grew up in, right? So, and even more so, some of these kids are dating people online they haven't even met, right? So, I mean, there's crazy stuff happening out there. And so we have to be able to help give them just some guidelines and some help, some kind of infrastructure. Trust me, they're going to be thankful for it. Their heart needs it, and it's going to break off a lot of anxiety that they have if they go, okay, here are some clear steps and pathways that my mom and dad are giving me, okay? So, number 2, write down a checklist of those responsibilities and have that conversation with them and maybe even work it together with them, right? And with your spouse if you're married. All right, number 3, or if you are co-parenting with someone, you know what I'm saying, however you're doing life with your kids. Number 3, and this is gonna, if you thought that was a little gnarly, this is gonna take it to the next level, okay? I call this a dating worksheet, and what this is maybe 12, 15 questions, and again, I'll share this with you later once I work all of this out, but what I've done with my first 2 is ask them about 10, I think there's 12, 15 questions on this, and let them walk through these things. These talk about healthy boundaries, the way that you're going to act in different categories, protecting your heart and the person that you're dating, and how do you know this relationship is over? What are the signs that this should be finished? Or how are you going to end this thing successfully and as a better person than when you started? Is that even possible, Well, let's talk about that. And then, of course, into physical and sexual boundaries and guidelines and all of those things. How are you going to make wise decisions? And who can you reach out to mentor you through this process, right? So I'm not going to get into all those details now, but have them go through it, okay? This is the part that might blow your mind. Then I have them sit down with me and say, okay, well, what did you write? Let's talk about these things, right? And then they take notes, we talk about it, we go back and forth, and then I go, you know what, this seems like a pretty good plan. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to sit down with this young person that you are considering dating, and I want you to lead this conversation using this worksheet and get ideas and come to some conclusions and dialogue together about this, right? Okay. Maybe for you, you're crying like, what in heaven's name are you talking about? Here's what I'm trying to say. If your teen cannot have that conversation, if they're like, Dad, I'm not going to do that, that's embarrassing, that's stupid, I'm not going to talk about, then they should not be dating. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Maybe you're 22 years old and you're watching this or something, and you still don't think you can have a conversation like that, or you don't want to take the time to walk through those things. You don't even understand what healthy boundaries are. Then you shouldn't be dating. And that's okay. You just got to figure out and get these things on board and get some help and walk through some of these things. But we're not done yet. Then I say, okay, you can walk through that. Hey, we talk about it. How did that go? Now I want you to go and find your 2 or 3 closest friends. And I want you to lead that same conversation with them. And then I want you to say to them, hey, I'm going to walk through this, or this is what I'm thinking about doing potentially with this person in this dating relationship. Can you hold me accountable to what it is that I'm putting out here when it comes to boundaries and health? And you're my friend, and if you're going to be a true friend, if you see me breaking these guidelines or stepping beyond this or disrespecting this person or treating them poorly or treating myself poorly or them treating me poorly, I need you to step in and help me. Can you do that? And if you can't have that convo, or if you don't even have 2 or 3 friends who can do that, then you need to really figure out how you're going to do this. And then we talk about mentorship, who's going to walk you through this, and it's kind of like dating coaching and whatever. And again, I'm not going to go through all of that, but anyway, I'm just trying to challenge you today and stoke you, parents, to have a thought that, shucks, I haven't even thought of creating any kind of help, infrastructure, boundaries, at all or being involved in this at all. It's just freaky to me. I just don't want to know, what's going on. Well, we just don't have the luxury of doing that. No parent has ever had the luxury of doing it, but us today more than anything. Okay, or more than any other time in history. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to watch this again with a spouse maybe, or a friend, or someone, or the other parent in your life, and say, hey, let's talk about some of these things. Let's talk about the age stuff. What does responsibility look like? And then maybe have this conversation. You might have a 13-year-old, a 14, or a 17-year-old maybe. And this could be contentious, or this could be something that you've got to really work out. Well, I encourage you to start writing some of these things down, make some decisions. Something is really better than nothing at this point, I'd probably say, and at least lovingly come to the table with your teenagers and start having this conversation and ask them what they think about this. But begin to have these conversations, all right? Hey, listen, I want you to ask some questions about this if you have any in the comments below, or maybe some other topics that you think that we can talk about in the future. Mom and Dad, listen, I believe in you. We can do this. We've got to unite together. We've got to walk through these things together. Things are more complicated than they've ever been. But I believe in you. You can do it. Talk to you soon.